Hello everyone and welcome to Ifty's Tech Corner, where today we're looking at the new Apple iPad mini. Now the iPad mini has been rumoured for nearly as long as we've had the iPad. It's certainly been ramped up in those rumours over the past few months. But I wasn't clear on how many of those rumours were actually fact and how many were based on hope. The hope that we receive something smaller that we can easily fit into one hand. And now that we've got a lot of competition in regards to such as the Google Nexus and the Amazon Kindle Fire HD, which we've reviewed in another video, the Apple have probably done the right thing and come out with a smaller iPad, 7-inch version, which we can easily fit into one hand. Is it better or not than the actual iPad? We'll find out later in the video. Let's start by taking a look at what we would receive inside the box. Now it's a standard Apple packaging, as we can see here, with the plastic wrap. So if I just remove this plastic wrap here, and hopefully the bottom should come away. There we go. So standard plastic wrap there. I'll just leave that there for a second. And we're greeted just like a normal iPad. Right at the very top of the box is the actual iPad itself. I'll just put that to one side for a second. We receive manual and some Apple stickers. Your Lightning to USB cable. Again, bear in mind this isn't USB 3. We're still looking at USB 2 speeds with these devices, which is kind of poor slightly. And the standard USB adapter 3-pin for European use here. So let's get this to one side and we'll take a closer look at the actual iPad itself. Now we've got the iPad mini here, and Apple wanted to be very clear when the product was launched that this isn't just a shrunken down standard iPad. It's a whole new design, and it comes with a whole new case design, which we'll have a look at shortly. And while the second, third and fourth generation of iPads have always been less indistinguishable from each other, you can't really tell the difference between, for example, the third gen and the fourth gen iPad mini almost look exactly the same. This is completely separate. It's got the anodized back. It comes with the black slate or the silver front that we can see here, and it looks more like a larger iPod Touch than a smaller iPad. The profile itself is more rounded than the full-size iPad, so the edges are more rounded than the full-size iPad. It doesn't have the sharper edges, and we presume that gives it a little bit more space for the battery inside the unit, but it also makes it very comfortable to hold, very comfortable to carry around. And the edges, for example, if you're holding it in one hand like this, it's very comfortable. It doesn't actually dig in to your hands at the sides at all. So it's very easy to hold. I mean, I haven't got particularly large hands, and I can hold the iPad quite comfortably in one hand here. And that'll be nice for when you're walking around with the actual iPad in your hand and tapping away on it with your other hand. Now, I'm just going to switch the unit on here. Obviously, the actual iPad itself is lighter because obviously it's smaller, so it's going to be lighter than the fourth generation iPad. It's actually around half the weight of the full-size iPad, and it's thinner also at 7.2 millimeters. The actual screen itself is the same as the iPad 2. So it's a 1024 by a 768 pixel screen. Now, we all know what Apple are going to do here. Apple are going to bring out a Retina. It's pretty certain that Apple will be bringing out a Retina version of this iPad mini, but they're going to trickle that update out. So they're going to make it a new revolution. So with the next iteration of this iPad, we'll probably see the Retina display itself. So overall, it's very comfortable to hold. It's not heavy at all. It's actually surprisingly light. And how durable this back is going to be, I guess only time will tell. You can see I'm getting some fingerprints on there already, but how durable the black and the silver backs will be will tell over time. Let's have a quick look at the actual button layout. Now, as we can see here, the volume rocker and the orientation switch is on the upper right side here, along with the camera on the rear. We'll have a word in regards to that camera later on in this video. But we haven't got a rocker. They are separate buttons. It would have been nice to have a rocker with a separate button in the middle for your play and pause and so on that we've seen in the newest iPod Nano. But there we go. So we've got separate volume buttons there, the orientation lock and the power button where we would expect to see it just at the top there. So at the top of the unit, you've got your power button, as we've just mentioned. You've got a small slit where your microphone is situated, and you've got your 3.5mm socket there where you would plug in your headphones. Note that it's at the top of the unit, so they haven't put it at the bottom of the unit, which I do prefer it being at the top of the unit personally. And on the left we have nothing. Across the bottom we have our lightning port. So lightning port obviously going across the entire Apple range now. And we've got two small grills here for our stereo speakers. Now the speakers themselves are quite loud, and since they're on the bottom and not on the back, the sound is closer to traveling in the right direction to you. So it's nice, clear stereo sound, and it's not as though the sound is going away from you because they're at the bottom rather than facing towards the back. You do feel as though the actual sound is coming out towards you. Even then, it's still less than ideal. You'd still probably want to use a pair of headphones with the iPad, which I'll note are not included. You don't get any headphones with this whatsoever, so there's no AirPods included at all. But they do the unit some justice when you're in a quiet location. Now, the only other button on the unit is obviously at the front here. So we've got the home button. Note that the home button is actually smaller than the button on your iPhone 5. And if I just pull the iPad down slightly here, you should be able to make out the top 1.2 megapixel FaceTime HD camera. Now moving on to the screen here. No, this is not a Retina screen, but it has the same resolution as the 10-inch display shrunken down to 7.9 inches. So it's the same resolution as the iPad 2, not the third or the fourth generation Retina iPads. Now, because it's been shrunken down, the pixel density has been boosted. So it's 163 ppi, so that's a nice increase over the iPad 2, which was only 132 ppi, but it falls short of the 4th gen iPad, which is a whopping 264 ppi, or even the iPhone 5, which is an astounding 326 dpi. So naturally, it means that the text isn't as sharp as it is on the Retina displays on the new iPad or the iPhone 5, but it's still a very nice looking, very bright and vibrant display overall. The brightness and the color reproduction is improved over the iPad 2, so it's comparable to the more recent Retina displays. The colors are very pleasing to the eye, the viewing angles are very good, so you can really view this. I mean, if you've got a second person watching a movie with you on the train, for example, they're really going to see the colors popping out even at an angle. Now looking at the performance in this iPad mini is running a dual-core 1GHz CPU with 512 meg of RAM. So it's the same as what's in the iPad 2, and as such it throws down the same benchmark scores, well exactly the same benchmark scores actually as the iPad 2. So the Geekbench averages out at around the same with the two units. So far off the new generation iPads, which are obviously twice as fast as these units. But overall it still makes for a really nice experience with the iPad mini overall. So in day-to-day usage, you're probably not really going to notice that extra boost that the newest generation iPad is giving you. So apps do load slightly more slowly, but they're still up and running within a second or two, so it doesn't really matter too much. And when web surfing, the iPad mini easily keeps up with taps and swipes. So perhaps not the greatest performance in the Apple lineup, but there's one place where it gets much better than the rest, and that place is battery life. Now I've tested the battery life in this by charging it completely full and looping a video to play, so it's constantly playing a video, and having a fixed display brightness at around the 50% mark, and the iPad mini managed 12 hours and 15 minutes, around the 12 hours 15 minutes mark, which I think is brilliant for a unit of this size, and it beats the Samsung Galaxy Tab, the Nexus and so on by quite a margin. So the battery life in this is very good. Now moving on to the camera, the front facing camera and the rear camera. Now we don't have HDR, we don't have the panorama mode that wowed us with the iPhone 5, but it does have a better camera than the iPad 2. So it's got a 5 megapixel camera at the back with an f2.4 lens and a 1.2 megapixel FaceTime HD camera up the front. But would you really be using a tablet to take images in the first place? I probably wouldn't ever use this. I wouldn't hold this up and take photos. I'd probably use my iPhone for that. And what concerns me more is the actual front camera for FaceTime usage, and that front camera is a very nice sharp camera. Now we can compare it against the other iPads. Obviously the other iPads, the 3rd and the 4th generation, have those Retina displays, whereas this is more of a fair comparison with the actual iPad 2. And between the two, looking at the costs and so on, I think the Mini clearly wins. You really go, unless you really need the bigger screen, in which case you'd probably go for a Retina screen, 3rd generation or 4th generation iPad. If it's between the actual iPad 2 and this unit itself, definitely go for this one. Excellent battery life, the screen is very nice, the boost in the pixel density makes it really nice and sharp, even though it hasn't got that Retina display. But what I would suggest is head down to an Apple store that's near you, have a look at the larger screen iPads, have a look at this one, and you'd probably find yourself leaning towards this, although it's got the smaller screen. As you start using the unit, you really don't notice the actual smaller screen. You really start getting into it. You're surfing the web, you're watching your movie, and you don't really mind that the screen is actually smaller overall. Now a more of a natural comparison is to compare this with the Nexus 7, for example. Now this is Apple's cheapest tablet in comparison to Google's device, and in practice they're very different devices, starting with the cost. The Nexus 7 16 gig, which is what this iPad here is still a lot cheaper than the iPad. These designs are also very different. The back of the Nexus is completely different to the iPad. It's iPad mini itself, but it feels somewhat discounted over the iPad. The iPad still feels like a much higher quality product overall. Now the only area where the iPad mini fails slightly in regards to the Nexus 7 is that the Nexus obviously has a higher resolution panel that's also 16:9, making it better for watching movies, for example. It's also narrower and easier to hold in your hand. Now the other tablet to mention is obviously the Amazon Kindle Fire HD, which we've taken a look at in a previous video. Now Amazon's latest also offers a higher resolution IPS LCD, and the extra selling point of it's got the same stereo speakers, but has the extra selling point of all the library system on the Amazon store. Now looking at the accessories that you get with this device, you still get your smart cover, and you still got the magnets down the side where it snaps on. I did test a smart cover with this. I haven't actually got it with me at the moment to demonstrate, but I'll try and get another one so I can actually demonstrate in a video for you. When snapping the smart cover on, you have to be a little bit more careful. By snapping it on quickly on a standard iPad, as it were, we find that it snaps straight into the center nicely, job done. Whereas with the iPad mini, I found that when snapping it on quickly, it would be slightly too high or slightly too low, and you had to line it up before you actually snap the magnet on. Not a major niggle, but something which got on my nerves slightly, and something which I wanted to point out to you. And obviously there's going to be many iPod docks and chargers and so on to connect to the lightning port down the bottom, and you also get the 30-pin to lightning adapter, which again I've had a look at in a previous video, which we can also use with the iPad mini. So just to summarize overall, this isn't just an iPad tablet made to a budget. It's not just a shrunken down iPad, as it were. It's in many ways, I feel, Apple's best tablet yet. It's incredibly thin, it's very light, it's very well constructed, and it offers phenomenal battery life. Although the performance doesn't match Apple's latest, and yes, the display is still lacking in resolution, we haven't got that Retina display there, but nothing else will leave you wanting more. And at the price point that this is offered at, around the $329 mark, which is about the £259, it's got a lot to offer. Similarly, the hardware, the materials, the lightness, the build quality, the overall package itself sits in your hand. It's much nicer than the Nexus 7 in my opinion, and it offers access to the more tablet-friendly App Store. But whether that's worth the extra cost depends entirely on your own budget and whether you really want to go between Android and iOS. Regardless of this, the iPad mini is well worth considering for anybody currently in the market for a tablet. Its cost is compelling, its design is excellent, really like the design overall, and of course it gives access to the best selection of tablet optimized apps on the market. To consider it a cheap, tiny iPad is not really too fair. It's really a great tablet overall. So there we have it. That's the iPad mini. I will go away and I'll test this device a bit further with a few apps, and I'll come back with any other information if need be. But a really nice device overall. Before you buy it, I would say pop down to your Apple store, have a look. If you don't feel as though you would mind the actual screen size difference between the larger 10-inch iPads and this 7-inch, personally, I didn't. I've got both the 10-inch and the 7-inch, and I enjoy using this just as I enjoy using the 10-inch. iPad mini is definitely one to look out for. Again, if you want to wait out for that Retina display, if you can wait that long for the Retina display, once this comes with a Retina display, excellent device overall. So what do you think of the iPad mini? Leave a comment below. Click on the above video for an overview of the Amazon Kindle Fire HD, the close competitor to the iPad, and join us again on IFTY's Tech Corner.